Welcome to Engineering Influence, a podcast from the American Council of Engineering Companies. And today we're going to be talking about a great entrepreneurial story in our industry. And I'm very pleased to be joined by Ernesto Aguilar. He's the president and CEO of Ardura Group, a firm that in just 10 years has grown from a regional engineering operation to a national business. And it has gone from really just a handful of employees to thousands of employees across the country. And along the way, it's become one of the most closely watched examples of how private equity is changing the landscape of the engineering industry, which is something that our members are, of course, talking and debating about significantly, given the nature of the changing shape of our business. Ernesto, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate the invitation.
Well, I'm really happy you could join us. Let's start at the top, really. Give us a little bit of start at the beginning. Give us a little breakdown of how Ardura Group came to be, the journey to this point now, and even the name itself, how that kind of ties in with the story.
Yeah, quite a story. So we actually started the company in 2017. And at that time in 2017, Jeff, there wasn't as much PE. Actually I went around telling people we were PE backed and they didn't know what PE meant. And I said, look at me. It's not physical education. It's actually, I had to explain what it was. So private equity started actually the PE company. This was the first company too. It was actually two guys. Mm-hmm. It was two guys.
Yeah.
They decided to start a PE company, and their first investment was they bought a company called King Engineering in Tampa. It was 100 employees. So that was May 1st, 2017. And that was pretty much the beginning of what now is Ardura. I started talking to the guys kind of the end of 2017 and joined them and really not understanding exactly what they were doing. But we quickly, 2018, we came with a strategy to build at first a big water firm. And at that time, Jeff, just to get an idea, we had 3 offices. We had one in Tampa, Sarasota, Miami, and that was it. And we came up with the idea of why don't we build this company in what we call the Big Smile, going from the Pacific Northwest, California, all the way to the Northeast, and start with a grin, we said, which is California to North Carolina. And the idea is those are the most sought after markets, growth areas. And so I will be honest with you, I got a lot of laughter when I came up with that and people, yeah, whatever. But fast forward now, it's going to be 9 years, actually, May 1st this year. So we are 2,600 employees, one of the largest water wastewater firms in the U.S., actually largest PE-backed water firm in the U.S. And I think this year we'll probably end up in the 50s in terms of largest in the ENR. So quite a journey. It's been a lot of fun, but that's how we started.
Yeah, it's a great story. And one of the challenges that we always hear about, growing firms through private equity, through acquisition, is a question of how do you keep a cohesive culture and company as you grow. With that short a time of growth, 10 years is a blink of the eye in a lot of our firm's histories. We have firms with storied histories, that go back, generations in some cases, but 10 years in such a significant growth period. Yeah. How did you keep that cohesion going? How did that fit in strategically?
Yeah. So 9 years, not even 9 years, Jeff.
9 years. 9 years. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah. If you would have asked me 9 years ago that we'd be this size, I actually probably wouldn't have believed it. So it's not something we never set goals based on dollars and that kind of stuff, how big we're going to be. But we were at the beginning, we were the plan was to build a company very people focused. So I'll give you an example. One of the things we came up with was, and this is back in 2018, so it was from the beginning, we said, we'll take care of the outside stuff, meaning financials, companies, and the employees are going to run everything internally. So there is an employee council, I think about 30 employees. Every program in this company has come from them. They even help us with the benefits. So last year they said we need to add another holiday. We had another holiday. So it's a pretty cohesive company in that regard. We have bought companies. So I think we've done 32 deals in those 9 years. We are very selective. How we pick companies. We probably go through dozens, even up to 100 companies a year. And we might make 1 to 5 deals a year. And one of the formulas, I'll tell you quickly, we have what's called a 3F rule. And the first F is fit. And it's kind of, I'll call it the fear fit. And it's more like, do we like these people? Do we get along? How do they talk about their employees? Why do they want to sell? And it's very quickly you can find out what kind of people they are. And then we kind of say, is this guy going to get along with this other person in the company? Second F is future. Is 1 + 1 = 30? Are we going to be better off together? If we're not, what's the point? And then the third is our financial component, which is financials. So we are very selective. And the first part is, look, the culture will never be exactly the same, especially when we talk about the parts of the company. But the idea that all of us are going to be respectful of each other's culture is probably the most important thing. And it is a very close-knit company, pretty close-knit company.
The what you mentioned earlier about the E&R growth, right? It starting out in 2018, you were ranked number 396 in the E&R top 500. By 2022, you were at 114 and growing. You want to be in the top 50. Was that part of the overall strategy for growth? Did you have a target on where you wanted to appear on that list or?
No, we never actually set goals to be a certain size or a certain dollar.
Mm-hmm.
The PE guys give us just the idea, but they didn't really actually drive us there. And we have an aggressive strategy. So we said we're going to be water, we're going to be transportation in these geographies. And when we see something that matches that strategy, we're going to be aggressive on it. But one thing I haven't mentioned to you, organically, we've been growing 15, 25% a year. We're hiring about 20 to 50 employees a month. So last month we hired 47 employees. So it's very organically also growing. And we're just when an opportunity comes, we're very opportunistic and jump on it. And that's how it's grown. But we never had a goal I have an egotistical goal, which I call my ego goal, which is to be in the top 50. But that's it. We never really had those goals of being a certain size. And it's just happened. It's evolved. And all the employees are part of that. They really believe in what we're trying to do. And that's how the company's grown.
And you just had a recent acquisition, if I'm not mistaken here, Remington and Vernick Engineers. And they're a 125-year-old firm with a big Northeast footprint. How has that, it impacted Ardura Group and its exposure to Northeast markets, but then also acquiring a firm with a 125-year history and bringing it into that larger family? Can you talk a little bit more about that acquisition?
Yeah. So, our headquarters, by the way, are in Miami. So we're very big in the southern states, Florida and Texas. That's been kind of our powerhouse area. Not as strong in the West Coast, but this is our powerhouse area. But we knew if a platform came up that made sense for us in the Northeast, we would do it. So we would never acquire little firms. It had to be a platform. And someone introduced us over a year ago. RV, they were thinking about it, but they weren't there. And we just got talking. And over a year, we realized, you know what? The culture fits too good. They were looking for a water company. We don't have a presence up there. And honestly, an honor to have a 125-year-old company kind of join us. So over a year, we decided they actually did not go out to the market. They were thinking about it, but they just said, you know what? Too good a fit. Let's just make a deal. And so excited. They're very much like us. One of our PE guys says you have a Ardura, Florida, the guy down there, Latino guy. You have the Texas guys and have the New Jersey guys. It's the same guys. They're very much similar. One guy wears a hat. The other guys don't. But the idea is they're very similar guys, very hungry. You put them together. They have the same, they're very humble. Humility's there. The growth, the hunger to grow is there. So we saw that in this guy's Remington Verdict. They wanted a new chapters, 225 years to grow. And it's going to be a kind of great fit. So still getting over it. It's the biggest deal we've done in our Ardura's history. So.
Well, I want to take it from the inside because you've seen this, throughout the history here. You have, as you mentioned, you have two PE partners, right? You have RTC Partners and now Littlejohn and Company. A lot of firms are thinking about PE. A lot of firms are thinking about acquisition. What do you think is probably the biggest misunderstanding that firm executives have about the PE process, or just going into this environment of positioning themselves for acquisition, or even considering an acquisition strategy of their own?
Yeah. So, Jeff, there's three types of, if you want to call it, models in our industry. Private companies. I actually have my own business. I work for private companies myself. Then there's public traded companies, the WSPs, the ECOMs, and then private equity, who's taking a massive influence our industry. I think half the deals last year were private equity. So, like, I don't think any model is better than the others. It depends on where you're at. There's also things better than others. For me, the PE model, what it's done is it's a private company, so you don't have as much as the regulations of a public traded company with capital. But like anything else, you have to have the right partner. If you don't have the right partner, you're going to have the same issues everywhere else. So, I think my biggest surprise was the partners I've had that you would think it's all about money. All these guys are all about money. I actually haven't seen that, Jeff. Yes, the ultimate is an investment. So I'll give you an example. Last year, the PE guys thought I should reduce the earnings and increase the budget pool, the bonus pool for the year. They came up with that. I was almost shocked. So I think there's a little bit more long-term, 5-year kind of plan usually on the PE companies. But the misconception is that all these guys care about is money, 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 money. I have not, with my partners, I have not experienced that. But again, you have to be selective about the partners you have.
And that's that's a really important thing. I think you've referenced that in our conversation so far. It is the cultural aspect here, because I think that a lot of times firms are concerned because they're coming into a position where they're like, okay, private equity is coming into the marketplace as an owner or as a CEO. Our firm is at that point where if we want to grow or we want to leverage new markets, then having a partner, if it's larger or regional and can, take advantage of that, is a good business decision. But we've worked real hard to build a culture. And the concern is that a firm would acquire us and then it would just kind of destroy that culture. And I think that goes to your point of finding the right partner, right? It's not just a numbers question.
Well, our partner, Jeff, is actually not involved in our business too much. Most employees don't know who they are. They do help us when it comes to M&A and the financial kind of stuff. But we're the ones who source our companies. We meet the companies. We bring forward in terms of what the strategy of the company, where we're growing, all the investments, all the hires. They're not involved in that at all. So again, you have to find the right partner. When we selected Little John on the last recap, we selected them for certain things. One of them was that they were open to having a larger pool of shareholders of the company. And not all of them were. And that's one of the reasons we picked Little John. So you have to decide what are your important points that you want to keep as part of your culture. Maybe ownership is one. And that's how you pick the partners. Now, there's no doubt, Jeff, our industry is going through probably the largest consolidation in its history, right? And so you can deny it, but it's happening, and unfortunately, size does matter to certain clients. So the projects are getting bigger. When you have all these resources in a company you give to a client, it does bring a lot of other opportunities for employees to work on things. So who knows what's going to happen? But right now, this consolidation is happening very strongly in our industry, and we can't deny that it's going to keep going for a while.
Well, let's pivot over to your sweet spot here, which is water, right? The three big that you work on, stormwater, drinking water, wastewater. Now that you have a national footprint here, where do you see trends in water infrastructure? Where do you see that market going? What's your position on, what needs to happen in Washington to keep it going? As a CEO, what's your perspective?
So water's about 65% of our business. The rest is transportation, a bit of municipal. I think it's easy for politicians to look at roads and point to them bridges when they're, putting money into it. But the fact is, I think people are starting to realize that without water, doesn't matter what anything else. So there is a lot of infrastructure money that needs to put into water, wastewater. We've been fortunate because a lot of the funds come from enterprise funds. But with the last JIA bill, there is a lot of money that went into it. I do see the administration asking more questions. They're asking us more questions about what's happening with the water industry. We just won, actually, the largest desalination plant, and one of the largest in U.S. history we're about to work on. And we got 2 other desalination plants. So I think it's being known now. Damn, we're running out of water in some of the growth areas, Texas, Arizona, Nevada, California. And I think Washington's starting to get it. They're starting to see it. It's starting to affect some of the economies. I don't think it's out in the public yet. Everybody talks about traffic and all that kind of stuff. And I think people take for granted when they go to the faucet and put water or flush the toilets. What is this thing? And people don't think about it, but it's starting to be an issue in many places. So I do think there is going to be more money put in as soon as the problems start, when you're starting running out of water, I see more money going into it. And it is right now we have a ton of work. Every water firm has a ton of work. So there's the other issue: how are we gonna get all this work done? But that's something else, right?
Yeah, and that ties in. I want to let our listeners and viewers know that we're going to have a part 2 of this conversation where we're going to talk a lot more about workforce, culture, and of course technology and AI and how that's impacting the industry. When I was on staff with former Chairman Schuster of the T&I committee, his mantra was, you can't have economic development unless you can flush a toilet, right? It's that whole idea that you need that infrastructure at the ground level before you can even consider.
And that's coming from
Washington. Economic development. And that's coming from Washington. That's yeah, exactly. That tells you something. What I guess now that you have membership within ACEC and we appreciate membership in the organization, of course, how do you leverage that membership across the states now that as you grow to make sure that you're active in the organization and taking maximum benefit? How's that impacted your business, and how do you try to keep that relationship?
Well, I think ACAC is pretty much the advocate for our industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the voice, if you want to call it. I think it's important on the political side for the politicians to know what's going on. I don't think, like I said before, I don't think people take for granted what's going on behind the scenes. And I don't think if we had an advocate or a voice united, like you guys do for all the companies, it helps us kind of get the word out there that this is important. I think otherwise take it for granted. So there's a lot of things that are going to come up that are bipartisan, by the way. This is all bipartisan stuff. It doesn't really matter. And so we are very big on helping anything that AC does for all the industry, because I think we're going to need it in the future. When they look at funding, this is sometimes forgotten. Not lately, but it has been in the past. And that's why our infrastructure is in bad shape. And I think as we grow, as things happen, as the infrastructure deteriorates, we're going to need more of the influence from ACEC to help us out. I really do believe that.
Well, we're gearing up for at the time of this recording, at least, the spring convention coming up in May, where we're going to be hitting Capitol Hill with our main policy priorities. We talked about water a little bit, but from your perspective as a CEO, what do you think is one of the most important policy provisions as an industry that we should really be advocating for right now?
I still think there's still a gap in things that we could be done. So, for example, there's other parts of the world where P3s or design build are much bigger. You get the private industry kind of, and I think the U.S., which shockingly is behind. It's behind many of the countries when it comes to when it comes to P3s or letting outside kind of vendors privatize some of the infrastructure moving forward. So I think we're going to have to go there. That's my guess. I think that's going to kind of fill the gap in terms of financing and the speed, or else we'll never catch up. And so I could see that in the future, kind of that happening, just privatizing some of our infrastructure. Privatizing means you let the operator take it for like 30 years and then they give it back to the government, either state or federal. And so I could see that happening in the future.
Yeah, we've done a lot of research for the ACEC Research Institute. We talk about the impact of technology, and is something else that we talked about before we got on the call today, which is value-based. How do we value our work, especially with the way that technology is transforming the industry, and then also just that getting away from just towards value-based pricing. That's a whole separate conversation I'm interested in having with you on exactly how we approach that business model.
Yeah, obviously this is something that's dear to me, because I think, and it's not about money. Sometimes I feel that our profession doesn't value itself as much as it should. We're not a commodity. We shouldn't be a commodity. We're looking about people's lives when we talk about water and transportation. But yet when we actually put our fees out there, we don't act it that way. And it should be quality-based selections. It shouldn't be price-based selections. When we're talking about infrastructure, we're talking, again, about people's lives and kind of mankind who moves forward. And I look at now it's getting better. On the water industry, it's pretty good. Okay. But in some parts, like I'll pick on transportation, on a lot of the DOTs, it's actually based on, they max out your fees. And this is not like going to shopping for materials. And so I think that's something we probably as an industry could do better, to people understand that in order for the people you have is a skill set, that's a very high skill set that you have to go to school for, and you need experience or experience. It should be valued that way. So I think all the engineering companies understand that. I think our clients need to get there to the point where, and it's our fault to a degree, we need to value our work to what we're actually doing. It's not a hourly thing. It's really based, and it should be quality based. And many states already do the quality based selection, but I think we need to work harder on that. And why? So it's not just for money. The engineers. The problem is, Jeff, is we have a shortage of engineers. We have a massive shortage, and partially this is the reason. If you don't actually compensate these guys for what they're gonna work at, they're not gonna join this profession. So we need to entice more people in this profession. That's the way you do it. This is to be it's a career. It's a career. It's not a job, and you got to pay people out the same way.
Yeah, and that's something that we're continuing to try to push, is that essential value message of the work that our industry does, and the fact that unlike other portions of the built environment where you see, if you see a building going up or you see a bridge being built, you see the construction, and that is a direct, tangible correlation. But the engineering work, good engineering is invisible for a reason, because it's done in such a way where it is part of the whole end result of the project, and it's getting that essential value of the work that does at the beginning in the design phase and the oversight of that entire project that we need to make more tangible, and we need to show people.
Jeff, you can construct a bridge, but if it's designed wrong, you can build it, and that thing won't last.
Yeah.
So, and I think people forget that. So I think it's something, and we talk about it. I mean, the industry is very aware of it. It's getting better. We talk about it, but we ourselves as an industry are at fault too.
Yeah.
Because we actually lowball the fees, and that's not the way it should be.
Yeah.
The other professions don't do that, right? They value what they bring, what they study, what they bring, their experience, and we should be the same way.
Absolutely. So, well, we're going to wrap it up there, because we want to have this, again, this is kind of setting the stage, introducing you for additional conversations. But anything else you want to add right now, Ernesto?
No, I think, well, first of all, I appreciate what ACEC does for our industry. There's a lot of things happening. I think, one of the reasons, Jeff, PE is so interested in industry is because it's known now. The infrastructure bill helped. This, to me, is an opportune time for industry to take advantage of many things. There's now knowledge about the industry needs money, funding. There's a lot of things happening right now. The PE is very much into it, right? So I think it's an opportunity to take advantage of how we bring up the whole industry, the whole engineering industry. How do we take advantage that everybody, the mainstream media, the mainstream normal guy knows about this? So I think there's a lot of things we can work at. Pricing is one, advocating for more funds to get our infrastructure going up there. And so I think it's cool, and I think it's interesting what you guys are doing for us here. So let's take advantage of it as an industry and do some good things.
Fantastic. And I'm looking forward to our next conversation, really, like I said, focused on workforce, technology. All that really builds into what we've already talked about here, how we value ourselves, how we price ourselves, and just the growth of the industry overall. Until, that point, Ernesto, I really do appreciate you joining us on the program.
No, thank you, Jeff. Thanks for the conversation. I appreciate it. Till next time.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's Ernesto Aguilar. He's the president and CEO of Ardura Group. And this has been Engineering Influence Podcast from the American Council of Engineering Companies. And we'll see you next time.